Hi, my name is Timothy Virkkala, at Workman on social media. This is my channel, Workman on YouTube, or Timothy Workman Virkkala. I guess that's what it's called. Whatever. Workman.comment I call it, but I have a Workman.comment blog at Workman.com. All that kind of stuff. I'm sporting a coronavirus haircut. That is, I'm not getting a haircut until this season is over, though I probably have the flu, that flu anyway, or some flu. I've been having it all winter long. This is a very strange time, which is a good time for me then to start a podcast. The third episode will premiere on Monday the 16th of March, 2020. And here is a preview of that podcast. I'll give you a portion of it. It's an hour-long podcast, and you might like it because it's about an interesting person who has interesting things to say about convincing people of the idea of freedom. Welcome to the LocoFoco Netcast. My name is Timothy Workman Virkkala, at Workman on social media. That's Workman with an I, not an O. And today we're going to be joined by Dennis Pratt, the Libertarian master of Quora, Quora.com. It's exciting to be here talking to you. It's exciting for me because you are the greatest Quoran on the planet. I started in 2013, but I couldn't find what date you started.
Yeah, I think I started, well, I'm 3 years and a quarter into it. So that would be 2016. I think it was December 4th, 2016.
What got you into Quora? What was your interest in Quora?
Well, I've always been interested in personal freedom and in human freedom. It's always been a major avocation for me. And I came from it from the left, but definitely the push was human freedom, allowing people to be freer. I discovered libertarianism in the 80s, and I spent a lot of my time arguing with people about how freedom could best be implemented. And but I was doing other things. I was starting up companies. And then when I stopped doing that, I was starting up charities, but always with an idea of how could this actually advance human freedom. My last charity startup is actually one that Mary Ruart had inspired me to start up, and it became the largest in-person personal growth group in the world. We were doing 250 events a year. We had 4,500 members here in just the Boston area. But for me, it was an attempt to remove the blocks that prevent us from reaching our potential that we hold internally. And I had seen in all these types of courses that at the end, people actually have this live and let live ethic that we embrace. They come in and they're suspicious of other people, and they don't like other people, and they're judgmental. But by the end, they see each other's humanness and they see each other's uniqueness. And even though someone's on a path that's different from them, they kind of go, well, I wouldn't do that, but I understand what you're doing, and I want to support you in your path. And it was a beautiful thing. And so I thought that of all the efforts that I had done to, for my advocation of advancing human freedom, that was probably the best thing to do. And then Trump got elected. And
Are you telling me you're a post-Trumpian Quoran?
I'm a post-Trumpian Quoran.
Wow.
And it was actually Trump, or the reaction to Trump, that caused me to give up on my personal growth empire. It was gigantic. And then to start learning how to write on Quora. But what happened was all of the, so Boston is a very progressive area. All my friends are leftists and that type of thing. And so even though we had this beautiful, group of people who were supportive and stuff like that, when Trump got elected, they all turned hateful. And we would go into these workshops and stuff, and almost immediately it would become kind of a democratic hate fest. And I was like looking around going, wait. This is going in the opposite direction. We should be going towards love, towards tolerance, towards understanding one another. And they were using their participation in personal growth as an indication why they were so better, and therefore they should use the government to womp on those guys. And that was when I lost all faith at my back. I had done stuff around homeschooling and homeschool alternative school startups. And that's when I kind of said, all these indirect measures haven't really worked that well for me. All my conversations at cocktail parties haven't really worked that well for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write directly about the beauty that I see in libertarianism. I had bumped into Quora before. I thought it would be a good fishing hole. And that's actually what I want to tell your listeners, that, the first thing you want to do is find a good listening hole, because frankly, the Thanksgiving dinner table is probably one of the worst fishing holes you can have. Those people are going to dismiss you. They're not interested in what you have to say. But with Quora, we have a group of people who are at least self-identifying as intellectual, as curious about ideas, as not wedded to the current thought. Now, whether most of them are or not is another question. But these at least are identifying as that set of person. And I think that Quora is just fabulous for libertarianism. Most of the people we talk to will never become libertarian. And so if you're spending your life trying to convince Grandma Moses to become libertarian, you're wasting your life. And there's very few of us out here. So what you need to do is you need to find that small, teeny sliver of humanity. I call it the open and curious set. Okay, they're open to these eyes, they're curious about them, and they're not going to freak out almost immediately. They're going to be, well, tell me a little bit more, or why this, or why, and we can actually have a discussion. So I gave up on all my other charities and stuff, and I just started writing full time on Quora. Turns out that I wasn't that good a writer, but I'm a nerd, so I just learned how to write better. And Quora is great because it gives you feedback on how successful your writing is. So I pay, I'm good at looking at feedback and kind of thinking about stuff. I also iterate a lot. It takes me about 4 hours to write a Quora answer. And I go through multiple iterations before I even post it. But once I post it, I'll go through another 10 or 12 iterations of that answer once it's posted in just the next week. Especially as I see how people are kind of reacting to it.
And when you say iterations in that week, are you talking about revising the original piece? Are you talking about answering questions that comments that follow? What are you talking about?
Revising the original piece. What I'm looking for is I have an inkling of an idea that I want to convey to people. For those who don't know, Quora is a question or answer forum. So the QU in Quora stands for question, and the A stands for answer. And so people will ask questions, and very few of them are in the libertarian area. It turns out that there's about, 20,000 questions now around libertarianism. So there's a rich body of questions. But so I'll see a question, I'll have an inkling of an idea. How can I convey this? I have to really fight hard with myself and on my own assumptions. How can I talk to the person that I really want to reach, which is that open and curious person, the person who's, just kind of, he's drinking his coffee, he's thinking about things, he comes across this question, he starts reading, and I want to appeal to that person that, okay, look, here's something that you've never heard of, here's something that you've been told is evil or fascist, but let me explain this to you the way that I see it. That this is actually supportive of human beings. This is actually how we want to treat one another long term. And there's consequences to that. And the consequences you may say, well, we're not ready for, but let's talk about that, whether that's true or not. So I have to think about that, and I and when I post it, I have it pretty good, but I have 1,400 answers. I have 1,200 answers that have failed that are in my draft folders. And a lot of those I've spent a lot of time trying to get and mold to an answer. And it just collapses. I don't know how to communicate these ideas. These are hard ideas to communicate given the indoctrination soup in which we sit. So, I'm almost 50-50. When I start an answer, there's about a 50% chance I'll actually complete it. And it'll take me like 4 hours to finish. And then, even then, my answer isn't good. And so I get answers, I get responses from comments, I get responses in terms of whether people are upvoting it or not. I look at it, I go, well, maybe this or maybe that, and I'll tweak it and iterate it and iterate it until I go, that's about as good as I can do with my skill level as it is right now. And I'll return to it a year later or something and try to improve it then.
Well, that's very much a learning process for you, and you're basically adapting to the circumstances that you're actually in, which is in its own way the kind of heroism we're expecting of everybody, right?
Yeah. It's certainly a humble approach, right? It's a humble approach saying that I'm not. I'll write to people, and on Quora there's questions of how you write on Quora and how do you get people to understand your answers, and I get a lot of those questions because I'm a successful Quoran. But I tell people, look, I'm not that good a writer. That's not what I'm trained in. I'm an MIT nerd. What I'm good at is learning. Okay, what I'm good at is being humble enough to say, this sucks, let me improve it. This sucks less. And I want to get up to a suckiness level where I go, I can live with this suckiness. I then post it, but then I improve it to, okay, this doesn't suck as badly. If one of my answers gets 5% upvotes, so of those people who read my answer, 5% upvote it, I consider that a gigantic win. Every once in a while, I'll get 10%. And I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. Now, there are people who get higher percentages, but they're not as didactic as I am. Right? I'm actually trying to convey these ideas.
Now, I also write on Quora. I mean, like I said, 2013, but I don't try to be as good as you. I don't spend as much time at it. I'm very fast, and I'll publish something. And it's usually out of my head because I'm not going to bother to get links for people. Almost never. I don't do any work for Quora. I answer a question and I leave. And then I come back and then I start making corrections. So you also correct. Do you have any problem when you make really huge changes, or do you make small changes in your answers?
Every once in a while, I'll understand that a section is just not working, or that I took it too far off the main topic, and I'll throw it down into a footnote. If you actually go through my old stuff, you'll see things that say footnote 1, and there's just a side discussion. So I'll do that type of arrangement, but generally the structure, when I get the inspiration, so I read a lot of questions. I'm asked to answer a lot of questions. I'll read a lot of questions, and just depending on how I feel that day, and so I'll feel inspired to respond to something. Trying to get that inspiration out and communicate the vision that I see. I talk about it like, trying to you have a beautiful scene and you try to describe it through a cocktail straw. How do you do that? The structure usually comes to me, and I'm pretty happy with the structure, but I have to be extremely careful with how I phrase things. I have to think about people who are just not aware of the idea of freedom, of people not being subjugated, of people of kind of a goal of allowing each other to live their own lives as long as they don't hurt anyone. It's hard to put myself back in that place. I mean, I was in that place in 1979, 1980. I'm not in that place now. I'm decades away from that place. I have to kind of put myself back in And luckily, we have a comment section where people are more than happy to explain.
Yeah. Well, they explain where they're coming from as well, I assume. Though often they're very nasty. At least it's been my experience, is that there's a lot of weird responses on Quora. Of course, many of the
Yeah.
questions are loaded in a weird way, like they're loaded to get a particular kind of answer, and then it's our job to show a way out of that trap, because they're setting a trap. Do you answer those kind of questions, or do you stick to more earnest questions?
Actually, I like those questions. There's a difficulty with them because sometimes I'll spend a lot of time answering one of those questions, and then one of our other libertarians will report the question as being not earnest, and they'll collapse the question, and my answer won't get seen, and it's like so frustrating. But one of my favorite classes of question is, why are libertarians so blank, right? And so, I have two that I answered rather early that I really love. Why are libertarians so narcissistic? So I said, okay, so let's go to the psychological definition of narcissism. And I went through the 9 indications of narcissism. And I basically said, okay, well, let's look at this one. Is a libertarian or an authoritarian more narcissistic on this scale? And and each question, of course, authoritarians who are trying to impose their view of the world, their preferences on every single other human being, has to be more narcissistic. I could have made that point really quickly, but I took 9 questions and said, well, and on this particular dimension, it looks like the authoritarian is more narcissistic. And so I kept a running score at the bottom, and well, it's 0 to 1. 0 to 2, 0 to 3, but maybe the next one, maybe we'll find how libertarians are narcissistic. Oh, 0 to 5. So I like answering those types of questions because they come from such a confused state. And I think the thing that I do that's really different, I do a number of things that are really different from my libertarian friends. We have about 100 libertarian writers on Quora. And one of the things is that I write to that open and curious set. No matter what who the person was who asked the question, how angry or confused they were, I say, oh, well, here's this class of question. You who are open and curious, let's see, does this make any sense? So I always am thinking, I always hold an image of that open and curious reader. What happened early on when I first went to Quora, we had a bunch of libertarian writers who felt besieged because they were getting hit with so many outlandish questions and straw men and ad hominems and stuff. And they would respond to the anti-libertarians, the people who were trying to undermine us. And so what you got was, when you read some of these answers, was a lot of anger. And libertarianism is probably the most joyous ethic that's out there. It's probably the most loving ethic that's out there, which is really odd that it takes a bunch of people who are pretty high on that Aspie level to to say no. If you really want empathy, right? If you really want empathy, you have to be libertarian.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. There will be more on LocoFoco on YouTube and LocoFoco.net on SoundCloud. I'm at workman.com. You can find me on many social media platforms as @Workman. That's Workman with an I, not an O. What can we do? We can have fun and wait this coronavirus thing out. I hope. Or at least we'll leave beautiful corpses.